When I made the transition from investment banking, then I was head of energy at a local investment bank, and I was transitioning into real estate and infrastructure development in a commercial role. But I'd never worked in the sector before. But I believed in my capacity to apply myself with all those reasons I was hired and the reasons that motivated me to take the plunge.
Right.
And so once I was able to do all those things, it gave me confidence in the transition. Because sometimes we take transition decisions and we start to question ourselves, we're checking out because we haven't truly weighed through the why behind what we're doing.
A lot of women often wonder what it takes to build a career that's meaningful, impactful, and successful. Today's guest is a business leader who's done precisely that. She has mobilized billions in investments, shaped Africa's energy and infrastructure sectors, built relationships and partnerships across industries, borders, and boardrooms, and continues to empower women to the highest levels. Rolake Akinkugbe-Filani is not just a leader. She's a mentor, a coach, a visionary, and now an entrepreneur. She's our guest today on Women Leaders Unscripted. Today on Women Leaders Unscripted, we have an incredible woman who has blazed the trail and continues to do so in multiple sectors: energy, investment, infrastructure, international development. She continues to do this. She makes it look easy. We know it's not. She does it with elegance. She does it with grace. And she's world-renowned expert. Today, I have joining me none other than the incredible Rolake Akinkugbe-Filani.
Hi. Listening to all of that, I'm like, world-renowned. That's massive.
You are.
Yeah.
Thank you for joining us today.
Thank you for having me.
And when I say world-renowned, I actually mean that because, in researching, I was like, oh, in all the best ways possible.
Okay.
So you've done and continue to do excellent work that has gone beyond the shores of the African continent. And we're going to talk about that because it's important. I think that sometimes when we ourselves are doing the work, we don't realize how much impact, how much international, transcontinental impact that we're making. So thank you.
Thank you.
Your name is so beautiful.
Okay.
What does it mean?
Okay, so, most people know me as Rolake, but the full name is actually Morolake.
Right.
And if you wanted to put that into a sentence in Yoruba, it's literally Moriolake.
Right.
Which is, I have seen something precious, something of wealth, of honor to cherish or to pamper. So I guess from my parents' perspective, they felt they had seen something so precious to keep. Yes.
I love that.
Yeah.
And then speaking about childhood, so my mom is Yoruba.
Okay.
And one of my names is Morenike.
Oh, okay. Very similar.
Very similar.
Very similar.
And I sort of, so like I had aunties who would come and Wama Kemi. So they would be like, don't do this, we brought this for you. So I grew up understanding like, I was wanted. It shaped me. I mean, my mom didn't really like it because she's like, no, you're going to do all the chores. You're going to wash the plates. You're going to, but what it made me feel was I was a child who was wanted. And that just does incredible things to your mind. So for you, how was growing up like?
I definitely felt accepted and loved. I don't think there was any moment in my childhood where I felt like my parents did not accept or want me in any case. Although there were highs and lows, but I think it was a fairly happy childhood. Although I do remember one season in my childhood for about 6 months when there was a bit of turbulence in my family. And it was really interesting because I always point to that as part of my journey because it kind of disrupted my worldview about perfection. from a family life perspective.
Right.
And I always say that every family has a bit of dysfunction, right? Just to different levels. But it was important because I think it was preparation for the real world, that not everything will always be hunky-dory and smooth sailing. Thankfully, the situation rectified, but it definitely changed my worldview. So I think for me, my childhood was happy. It was very affirming.
Right.
And, my parents, my mom and dad always exposed me to a lot of things. That's why I kind of grew up in my career and professional world feeling like I could do anything. Right?
Right.
So, yeah.
So we're going to talk about, you are, again, when I speak about you, I think just one of the women who has made incredible impacts in the especially in corporate, and we'll talk about that. But I still want to go back to the childhood.
Yeah.
As a mother yourself, why, and you've spoken about the values of, validation, affirmation for girls and boys. How should we be more mindful and intentional about speaking into our children or ensuring that they grow up, because the world is rough.
Yes.
The world is tough. But that they grow up knowing that there's that grounding for them.
I think that's a very important point. There's a story, a moment in my childhood that I always like to point out. I think it was when I was about 11 or 12. I don't know if you recall in the days when CNN kind of first came out. And it was one of those days I'd come back from school. I met my parents then watching CNN on TV, and Christian Amanpour was on TV. And my dad kind of randomly turned to me and said, Rolake, you could be Africa's Amanpour one day.
Oh, wow.
And it was like a seed that was planted in my mind about possibility and what I could become, because she was someone I'd been seeing on TV for a while. And I thought, this woman, she's really clearly, there's something about her. I don't know who doesn't know Christian Amanpour in the media world. She's one of the foremost journalists, international anchors and war correspondents. And I sort of carried that seed throughout everything I did, so much so that I remember when I finished my undergraduate degree from uni, the very first undergraduate job I applied for was a journalism program at Reuters. I got rejected. That's a whole nother story. But I think affirmation is very key.
Right.
It's very key from fathers to daughters. And this is very important. That particular relationship is key. Obviously, mothers to sons, mothers to daughters, key as well. But I think fathers to daughters is very, very powerful, because we grow up in a world where once a woman has reached a certain stage, the next thing is relationships, marriage. And if you haven't had a man, a strong male figure in your life that has affirmed you and given you a strong sense of your identity and grounded you in that, then it's easy to become like a wasp. You're just sort of going from here, pillar to post. So I think that's very important. So words are a very strong part of childhood affirmation. And I think this idea, especially for those who come from middle-class backgrounds where they're not really exposed, they don't get that much exposure, so they don't get street smarts in time. When you now send them abroad or send them out into the world, they start to encounter challenges. And I think from my perspective, having that disruption, I told you about this episode that kind of disrupted my reality a bit. I think that was important to happen. So I think every child growing up in any type of environment, whatever the family situation, needs to understand the realities of the world from an early age so that they develop coping mechanisms. They understand how to push through the stress, the conflict, the negativity, and they're grounded in who they are despite all of that. Yeah.
You come across as very confident, competent. Pardon my French, you have your shit together. And it could be daunting for a young girl watching who says, I could never be like that. How was the journey starting out for you? Have you always been this self-assured, confident, and like, I know what I want to do in the world and I'm going to do it? Or have there been bumps that you want to share with us and hopefully others who are watching?
Yeah, this is a very tough one, because despite all the things I just told you, I also grew up with some personal insecurities.
Right.
So the first one is in the context and time I was growing up, and if you know what it was like being a teenager when peer pressure, I was always the tallest girl in the class, in the room.
Right.
And it was something that I felt was an obstacle in my mind. And it's really funny how the mind works, because when I saw all my peers, in secondary school, JSS 1, 2, 3, you're like, everybody's just this height. And here is this Rolake, tall and lanky. And I was so conscious of my height. I used to sort of, kind of slump. And my mom would always say, sit up straight, slap my back kind of thing. So I also felt at the time that no boy will ever want to date me because of that. So that was one.
Right.
So I had this. When it came to my body, my physique, I had some early insecurities. And I think my height I just felt I was lanky. I was just clumsy. And so I never really felt in a sense that I fit in. It's really odd. So that affected my confidence, because I noticed that as time went on and I went to university, I became very self-conscious, even down to the clothes I wore, how I dressed myself, because I was trying to hide certain things.
Right.
So today, when I teach about confidence, I actually tell people that confidence is a skill that can be acquired.
Right.
I don't think it's something innate. Right. There's a nature versus nurture debate. Now, your environment can shape how early you build confidence, but I think it is possible to develop confidence. So I don't think it's something that just comes and happens.
Right.
But it's also certain ingredients, like building your competence, getting that regular affirmation, being exposed to certain environments, getting into what I call my virtuous cycle of competence. And I could
Please, let's talk about that.
So it's this idea that if you don't feel 100% about doing something, just do it anyway. Because you expose yourself. And if you expose yourself, you make mistakes, you fall, but you learn. So the next time you do it a bit better.
Right.
And when you do it a bit better, people want you to do it more.
Right.
The more people want you to do it, the better you get. So it becomes like a virtuous cycle. So when I say confidence is a skill that can be acquired, you gain it from your past successes, your past failures that make you better. You gain it from being affirmed and validated, but you also gain it from building your competence. So whether it's public speaking, showing up in a boardroom, if you don't feel confident, you should ask yourself the question, why? What have I not done, to get myself to this point? Right. So I think that's key. And so, it's just kind of going through those motions year after year and getting to this point where you feel like, okay, I've come a long way. Yeah.
Virtuous
cycle
of competence.
Yeah.
Virtuous cycle of competence.
And it can apply to almost anything.
Like even me, I'm just like, okay, I need to try that out.
Yeah.
Let's talk about competence. I was talking to someone a few days ago, and she was lamenting about trying to hire someone. And she was, she was saying things like, oh, people talk a good game, but, when they just can't do the work. And I understood it. But I'm like, why is it so hard for people to be competent? Why is that? Why are we finding increasingly that there's a dearth of competent people? What would you have to say to that?
That's a deep one, because I've recently transitioned from the corporate life, and I can talk about that a bit later. So I'm now in a position where I'm hiring. So I kind of have first-hand experience of looking for competent people, as opposed to being the person who's either thought to be competent for a role.
Yeah.
I think there are two things here. I think competence is systemic, a function of systemic issues. And I'll give you a practical example, and your individual drive.
Right.
The systemic one is, look at Nigeria's educational system or university system, and think about the quality of graduates we're churning out into the wider world. There's some fundamental structural and systemic issues in our system that has, in my mind, compared to when I was growing up, reduce the competency level. Not across board, but you're seeing it.
Yeah.
Think of some of the basic skills you look for on CVs. Some things, is it writing skills, speaking skills, comprehension, critical thinking? You see it on our social media commentary platforms.
Yeah.
So there's an issue with institutions and structure in our society.
Right.
But there's also what the individual needs to do,
Right.
regardless of the
those-
environment.
Right.
To get to a point where they present to be competent. But the caveat here is that competence is not an end goal in itself. Right? There needs to be a deep willingness to learn and a deep curiosity.
Right.
So I can hire someone who doesn't tick all the boxes, but in my mind, are they competent enough to be teachable? They have to have basic aptitude. So don't see it as hard qualifications always, because that is good. But I think it's how learnable, right, is this mindset? How teachable are you?
Yeah.
Can you grow into the role? And actually, for female leaders, I always say that at every level you are, there needs to be what I call a competency gap. Because if there's no competency gap, you don't have a drive and passion to close the gap or to achieve, right? So, yeah.
That's powerful.
Yeah.
And I like the thing that you say about, like, people don't need to tick all of the boxes, but are they curious? Are they teachable?
Right.
I mean, we can have that that's a whole nother conversation. I want to talk about your career.
Yeah.
Again, people, I was, again, in research, and I was like, oh my God, she has done like all of these amazing work across different industries: infrastructure, energy, finance, investments, international development. Please tell us, you know how, I don't know if you've watched Kemi Adesiba's To Kill a Monkey, where a feminist says, cut soap for me now. So please, cut soap for us and tell us, how did you, again, start the journey? Were you clear on, like, the specific path that you wanted to go on, or it's just been serendipity?
That is a whole jam question, Francesca. Because sometimes when people ask me this question, I feel like I wish I could trace every single thing I did 10, 15 years ago.
Yeah.
But the thing I say that actually helps me is that whatever situation I found myself, especially in that early years after university, I just applied myself. So remember I told you that the first role I applied for was...
The Reuters.
Yeah. But then immediately I learned early on, okay, you didn't get what you really wanted, but the one that you did get, how do you apply yourself to that? And I think that really gave me a mindset of, look, you can put me in water, I will learn how to become a fish, and I will swim well, and I will become the best fish in that water. And then you take me out of the water and you put me on land and terrain, and I'll learn how to become a mammal that crawls.
Right.
There's a certain mindset that's required.
Right.
So I think the biggest thing first is self-awareness, right? What is it that I do and I do well and has been a consistent thread? So I wasn't so obsessed or hung about it has to be this industry, it has to be that industry.
Right.
But I will say that one of my very first big breaks came when I got the opportunity to become an analyst at a risk consulting firm. And what was really good about that role is that it exposed me to working with different clients across different industries. It exposed me to the media. That was really part of also how my media journey evolved. And then when I started to hear, and because I was a hard worker, I was diligent. So these are the basic things. Cover the basics.
Right.
Turn up on time.
Right.
Work hard.
Right.
Show up.
Right.
Go over and beyond. Right. Prepare.
Right.
Right. And I would then start to get the feedback of how I was doing such good work and I was good at this, as good as it. And those for me were signals of, okay, actually, you know what? Strategic communications could be something that I should consider as a path.
Right.
And then I started to find that those skills that open doors were also a signal.
I see.
And I think that's an important one because I had a strong sense of mission from a very young age. You know that seed about I could change the world. I could be an Amanpour in my own field. I knew I wanted a global platform. So when I started to see that certain skills opened certain doors for me, I then honed in and leaned in. And then early on, when I discovered that, media was something I was good at, I got media training. I trained to be an anchor many, many years ago before I even came anywhere near TV anchoring. So I think that was really applying myself, not being afraid to try new things. I didn't do finance in university. You know, I had an economics and politics background, but I ended up transitioning into banking because in the field I was before, I had developed that reputation as a sector expert. So it was my expertise in the energy sector when I was in this country that then enabled me to be deemed suitable to transition into a banking role. So it goes back to applying yourself diligently to the things that you are doing in that moment in time. And of course, the rest is history and the story evolves from there. Yeah.
You know, as you were speaking, the Bible verse that came to me was, see thou
man diligent in his way,
work. He will stand before kings.
Yes.
And in this case, you...
Very practical.
And I think it's so powerful. And thank you for saying, because again, a lot of people think it's the sort of like destination. So like, I started out here and then, I want to work XYZ. And you're like, that's fine. But be excellent, be competent, be curious, open yourself up to opportunities, learn, apply yourself. So it's like the grand dreams are fantastic, but there has to be a structure that supports those grand dreams.
Absolutely.
And I think that that's such a powerful, even for me, like the way that I just listening to it, I'm like, I was probably doing that, but I didn't know.
You didn't realize you were doing it at the time.
Because and the thing that you say, pay attention to the skills that open doors.
Yes.
That's so, because sometimes we're just waltzing, we're like, okay, this promotion, okay, that I got it, okay, then the money, but you're not really looking back to say what worked, what was the key.
Yeah.
Oh, wow.
And God gives us patterns. Sometimes we ignore them. Right. He gives us patterns, but sometimes we're just like, it was just a stroke of luck or providence here. But there's a higher providence where we're giving certain patterns, which are a combination of grace, but also the things that we actively do and apply ourselves to, right? And if we can actually be self-aware and say, actually, the last time this happened for me, it was because I did this, this, and this. Maybe I can apply that pattern to this particular situation and see what happens. Yeah.
Whew. Okay. You're clearly a woman of faith. How has that defined your journey in your career, in your personal life, in running your business? How does it show up?
Okay.
Yeah.
That's an interesting one because my consciousness of the role faith had to play in my journey didn't happen very early on. Right. And I think that happens for a lot of people. We feel we're doing a lot of things in our own right and strength. And yes, we've been endowed with gifts and skills. And in a sense, you have to work it out yourself, right? You have to sign up for the course. You have to go for the training. You have to knock on that door. But I think for me, where I have seen it manifest the most is when I've been through the valleys, right? I've had moments in my journey that threatened to derail everything that I thought I'd known, everything that I'd built. And I think having faith as something to literally just hang on to, that was it for me. Now, for other people, it may have been faith consciousness through every decision. But to be honest, mine was, okay, I'm in trouble now. I need rescuing. So, but lately, I see myself in a sense, and the word I would use is like a marketplace apostle. So the calling and purpose is so much more than me being on TV, being on this podcast. There's a bigger piece. I'm part of a puzzle in a bigger picture. And the sooner I recognize that, the better for me, because it will then shape how I make decisions, how I view people, how I view opportunities. And also, I have such a huge burden of representation. Like, I feel it every day in my bones. Right? That's why I asked a member of my team to come here today and watch me, because I think it might inspire her a bit, right? She's early on in her career. Because I know the things I do affect and influence people. And if you see yourself as that light, as the Bible says, then you understand that it's just so much more than about you. So I think for me, that's been the biggest influence of faith in my journey. Feeling that burden of representation, everything I do and say, somebody's watching, somebody's listening, it's affecting how they see things. It's giving them some sense of possibility. Each time I hear a story about how somebody took a decision because they saw Rolake doing this, so long as it was a positive decision, it's very inspiring, right? So that's a role that faith has really played in that journey.
And so you talk about understanding that you are a piece of a large whole. And that's also powerful to me because, again, sometimes we don't think of ourselves as part of a larger picture. And we're individuals, so you individualize yourself, but what is coming to me from what you're saying is there's purpose, there's meaning, there's, I feel the burden for X, for representation, for this and that. Does that come with the burden of responsibility? Do you sometimes feel like, oh my God, I can't mess this up? Or, oh my God, I'm too tired. Or, oh my God, you know how they say, suck belly, make shirt fine. Do you just want to let it out and be like, I don't want to be anybody's role model today. Please don't look up to me. I don't want to mentor anybody. I just want to breathe. Does that responsibility sometimes come with a weight that is not often seen or spoken about?
Yeah, I think it does. And in fact, beyond the burden of responsibility is the challenge of authenticity.
Ooh.
So
no. We have to say that again.
So, listening to what you were saying, I was like, I think what she's really trying to get at is, can we truly just be ourselves? So the challenge of authenticity, or maybe it's authenticity and vulnerability, because if you're in the limelight and you're seen as somebody who's influential in terms of having impact, people look up to you, they follow you. The question of what part of what I'm portraying is truly Rolake, and where is the line between the true Rolake and the public Rolake? And since I've even come this far with my following, how much of my true challenges should I reveal to the public or the people who love me and, want to be mentored by me? And I think this is a constant challenge. And I think it's a battle that women especially are constantly navigating in their professional life. Because remember, we're multifaceted.
Yes.
And so we're carrying different expressions of our everything. You've shown up in the boardroom. The day before, you are shouting at your son and daughter for not washing the dishes. Or you had a huge argument with your spouse. Or you're dealing with postpartum. But it may not even be those things, right? Because those are very common cliche things.
Yes.
It may even be you have a deep insecurity that's challenging you, but on your social media platform, you're talking about confidence and holding it down together.
Yeah.
And so you're constantly navigating in your mind this kind of vulnerability. How much should I truly reveal? But I have a story around that because I went through a personal crisis in the UK before I moved back to Nigeria 11 years ago. And I said to myself, I'll never speak about this in public. And I packed it away and I just put it in one compartment there because this is not the Rolake I wanted to project. And I was doing a webinar one day called Leadership Matters with a chap in the UK and some other people. And there was just something in my mind. I felt like something was just saying that this is the moment where you're going to tell this story. And I was dismissing it. And we'd come to the end of the webinar. In the last 5 minutes, the host just asked some random question and says, so Rolake, tell us about a really dark moment. And I was like, this is the moment. And I remember I came out and I told this story. And after I finished and we were the people who were on the podcast at the end, we were all talking amongst ourselves, the audience had gone. I was telling the host, that was so cringe, I wish I had not said it. I was just feeling funny. But you know what? Within moments, the kinds of messages I got, and I remember I received a message, a DM from some lady in Canada who said to me that she had been on the brink and that me sharing that was what really changed her perspective about her situation. Yeah. For me, that was a real signal that we don't always have to hide so much.
Yeah.
There's wisdom in how we be vulnerable as leaders or come out across as authentic. But I think for me, that challenge of representation means we also have a responsibility to tell things as they truly are. It's not easy, and we're all growing into, I'm sure you know that in your own journey, right?
Yeah.
Because so many people look up to us. Some people think we're perfect.
Yeah.
And so if they hear certain things, they'll be shocked. So it's how much of a shock factor do you really want to put on the table? So that's,
You moved back from the UK 11 years ago.
Yes.
We are now seeing a wave of people jackpotting. And some jackpotting.
Yes.
Did people think, oh, you're crazy going back? Like, what were the reactions? What were your thoughts moving from somewhere where there's structure and this and that, and you have to worry about generator and lights and to somewhere where it's just like, okay, sometimes it's like the wild, wild west. What were your thoughts when you were doing that? And why did you feel like it was important to make that move at that time?
At a very basic level, I had a job offer, right?
I love that. She's like, please,
let's just, I had a job offer that seemed attractive. I'd just come through this personal crisis in my life, so I felt like I needed a fresh start. So the stars were kind of aligning. But honestly, if you'd asked my group of friends back then who would have been the first to move back, it wouldn't have been me.
Right.
Because I'd built my network. I built everything in the UK. I'd been there since I was like 15. So for me, it was home. And I was making this transition. But I've always been a risk taker, calculated risk taker. I've always been adventurous. Right. I like to try new things. I'm looking for a challenge. That's what keeps me motivated and going. I have a strong entrepreneurial mindset, even in the corporate world. So I'm a bit of a disruptor, right? I will challenge the status quo politely. Right. So for me, there was a part of moving to a new country, quote, that resonated with me. Right. However, by the time I landed, honestly, I remember within 3 months, I wanted to go back to the UK, and I was just complaining about this, complaining about that. But then that mission mindset of actually, Rolake, there's a bigger picture to this move. It's not just about your job that you're going into. Yeah. And I always say, when you come to Nigeria, you cross a certain time threshold. There's no going back again. It kind of sucks you in fully 100%. I then started to see opportunities to make a difference. And that kind of kept me here. Right. Of course, support of family and friends and all of that. So yes, that move was very interesting. But look, I'm here now. It's been 11 years going strong. Got married, had baby, all of that. Right. Yeah.
I want to talk about transitions. The way that I look at it, I think that we are always going through some sort of transition. We're moving from one dimension to another, one job to the other, single to married, married to single. Just we're constantly transitioning. But particularly, I want to talk about career transitions. Sure. You've done that as well. I mean, you've talked about being a disruptor, a risk taker, and which is ironic. You're like careful risk taker. I'm like,
calculated.
So
you weigh the options.
You weigh the options before you do it. But there are also people who feel like transitioning is like, oh, I have to have all of the details for this new sector or this industry I'm going into. I don't even want to consider it. I've been here for 20 years. I've done this for 30 years. I can't do it. What would be some of the things what tips would you share for those who are considering making those transitions, women especially? What would you share with them?
Okay, it's a good one. I think there's several things. The first is knowing your why. Why? What has brought you to this point of transition? And be very careful about the why behind your transitions. Some people transition because of sentiment, or because they feel that their backs are against the wall. They feel that, they don't like this boss. So I think women have a tendency to make decisions that are, on the one hand, emotional. That's just a reality. I'm not pushing a stereotype. This is a fact. But also, we have the tendency to make the decisions that have things to do with like family and culture and children and spouses. Yeah. And it's a double-edged sword, right? So I think you have to understand the why behind your transition. Now, if you're moving between industries into an industry you've never worked in, the people who are hiring you are not stupid, right? They're bringing you into this position because you bring some specific, unique skill set.
Right.
You should understand the why in that. When I made the transition from investment banking, then I was head of energy at a local investment bank, and I was transitioning into real estate and infrastructure development in a commercial role. A lot of people around me were like, what the heck is she doing? But in my mind, I wanted to achieve two things. I'd always been in professional services or consulting where I was advising a wide variety of clients. I wanted to go into an industry in an operational capacity. Right? And I didn't see those opportunities in the energy sector, but I saw it in another sector.
Right.
And then this opportunity also gave me the potential, the immediate opportunity to go into C-suite. It also ticked that box. It also ticked the box of me wanting to be an intrapreneur. You know, I told you I had this really disruptive mindset where I was always thinking of innovating, and I was attracted to pioneer opportunities.
Right.
So I was going to be the first chief commercial officer that the company had. So it ticked all those boxes, but I'd never worked in the sector before. But I believed in my capacity to apply myself with all those reasons I was hired and the reasons that motivated me to take the plunge.
Right.
And that was a mindset I had been building. Remember I told you about this, being able to apply yourself, being a fish in water, you can swim, being on land, you can crawl, whatever it was. So I was confident in my ability to make the most of it, but I also did the work. I read a really fantastic book. Some of you may know it. It's called The First 90 Days. Yes. Yeah, you read it. Powerful book.
Yes.
You know, so I prepared myself, right? But that transition also gave me confidence that, you know what, I can actually just really adapt and evolve and be flexible and all of that. But I also needed to be easy on myself. You know, I was going to achieve certain goals overnight. Transitions come with all sorts of, I had to also think about practically, how am I going to rebrand myself? I've always been an energy sector person. How do I bring this energy, real estate, and infrastructure story together? So I needed to be intentional about the new story I was selling about who Rolake was. And so once I was able to do all those things, it gave me confidence in the transition. Because sometimes we take transition decisions and we start to question ourselves, we're checking out because we haven't truly weighed through the why behind what we're doing. Yeah. So those things I think really helped me. Yeah.
I'm going to come back to transitions because I want to also talk about how you've transitioned again to now being an entrepreneur, doing your own thing away from corporate. But I want to circle back to being a woman in the C-suite. You talk about this opportunity being sort of like it's giving you access to the C-suite. Were you afraid? Did you have doubts? Did you have fears? How did you approach that while still being mindful of, because there are fears, and I want us to talk about that like it's not always this perfect place when we arrive there. What were some of the challenges you faced as a woman in the C-suite, and even on your journey getting there? What was going through your head? What were the things that you put, like, did you put things in place? Did you, like...
Yeah, that's a good one. Well, beyond reading The First 90
days.
It's just a good book. I go back to it time and time again.
Yeah.
Was really just recognizing that your career is like imagine a funnel, right? Up, there's one that's like a triangle, and there's another one that goes like that. So when you start at the bottom, entry level, you are kind of doing different things. They put you in different departments. You mix here, you learn compliance, you learn legal, you go here. As you start to move into middle management, you start to narrow, you become an expert. You're developing expertise in a specific... By the time you're getting to C-suite again, you're going broad again, right? It's not so much about your technical capacity, but it's more about your leadership skills. It becomes more about your executive presence, your ability to inspire and motivate people, your emotional intelligence, your relational intelligence, how you communicate as a leader. All of those things become important. So I had to really lean in a new industry to those things and build my competency in those things. So I actually got a coach. I did get a personal development career coach, right, for a season. That was really useful. But there were situations I found myself in that I'd never encountered. You're now thrust into decision making in the boardroom at executive level. You're now responsible for, scores and scores of departments and people. People are coming to you and knocking on your door every day. I had to quickly figure out what my own leadership style was going to be. And one of the things I did, which I actually did in my subsequent corporate life, the one that I had just before I became an entrepreneur, I said, look, I always want to be the leader that was approachable. But you can be approachable just by talking that I'm approachable, but the things you do. So one of the very first things I did, which people found strange, was I would leave my door in the office open. Physically open, right? So when people say they have an open door policy, I had a literal open door policy. And the only time my door was closed was when I was having lunch or when I was on a call. And as soon as I'm done, I'll get up and open the door. So people would walk past it and think, this is a bit strange. Nobody else in management is doing this. But I did this because it was important for people to feel like I could just walk in. That helped me connect. That helped people have conversations with me about what they were doing. It made it easier to get up to speed when there were issues in other departments that I needed to understand, because I had a literal open door policy. I was just able to build some relationships faster. So I leaned into certain things that I thought I could do that were uniquely me, that could help me come up to speed faster. So that's just a practical example as to how I navigate. And of course, there are other things like, just passive, dealing with microaggressions, trying to understand, and dealing with certain intersectionalities. When we talk about gender and age. I was a relatively young C-suite executive. I was also a woman, right? There were only 2 of us on the management team. So there are certain intersectionalities that we're dealing with. But I had confidence in my voice, using my voice, going into a meeting and actually preparing, not just winging it. It's something I tell my team now. If you go into a meeting, right, you may be the most junior person, but we should still hear your voice, even if you're asking a question. Right? Because it's building your confidence. It's also giving off a certain vibe and energy to other people in the room about what you bring to the table. So those little adjustments, those little strategies did help me get through that transition.
And how have you, so I'll give my example. So going into Silicon Valley, I thought was, so I was like, I've done all of this stuff in Sub-Saharan Africa, like I'm great at it. Everybody knows who I am. And then I go into this space and they're like, oh, you are great, but we don't know that. Also, we don't care. And it was jarring to me, not because I wanted applause, but because for the first time in a long time, I almost had to reprove, reset, and I hated it. It was just it was rough. We're seeing a lot of talents transition, across different continents. And there's now this need for multicultural, there's a level of multicultural skills that we need. As someone who has done all those transitions, what would you say are key things that we need to be aware of? So it's like, okay, you're leaving Nigeria and you're going to the UK, for example. You're not going to warm your father's stew in the office. Like, it's just not. Yeah. So what are some really practical things as people think about transitioning internationally, across the continent and things like that?
So I think for me, there are certain things, I call them my rabbits in the hat. I think this cross-cultural intelligence is such a powerful thing that really has set me up, for instance, for board opportunities, international board opportunities, because these are some of the skills that people look at. But you have to have a mindset of curiosity when it comes to working cross-culturally. Never assume. Ask questions, be inquisitive. Those sorts of things will really get you far. And so I think for me, there's no transition across borders that can be so different, even if you've only lived in Nigeria 20 years. If you're a person who's genuine, who's curious about people, right, and you want to build those relationships with people, then you will make ground. So I think curiosity is absolutely key. Right. You need a certain level of humility as well to transition across borders. You can't arrive and believe you know it all.
Yep.
And for certain types of those transitions, especially the ones that are maybe cultural countries, actually get help. Get a mentor, get somebody who can coach you, get somebody who's been down that path. What worked for them? What did they do? Learn about the culture, learn about the environment, even if you don't speak the language, right? I think those sorts of things, just basic humanity. Right? Yeah. And I always say that there's certain things that connect everybody, right? Even if you're not from the same place or the same gender, there's certain universal human traits. Many people understand family values. People understand family. Learn how to have conversations. Learn the art of small talk, right? You know, you go to a country, and even if you don't speak the language, because you picked up a few words in the local dialect, it immediately endears you to people, right? So these are some of the things that I say you should definitely, and this is why people struggle when they transition from Nigeria and they jackpot. It's not just about the role. It's about the environment.
The environment.
How are you going to assimilate? What things you want to get involved in? What do you bring to the table, right? As a member of society. So those things I think help with those sorts of transitions, especially the international ones.
You talked about storytelling and sort of deciding, hey, here's how I'm going to speak about what I'm doing or where I'm at. So very intentional about how, but women don't do that a lot. We sort of like just, I'll just show up and I'm great or not, and we just coast through. Why is intentional storytelling, especially for women in leadership, why is it an important pillar to build?
Yeah. I think for women in leadership, it's important because you have to showcase results.
I love that.
Yeah, you have to showcase results. And actually, there's certain women that I look up to. I thought I was a storyteller. But when it comes to showcasing their accomplishments and results, as in using figures, data, and numbers, I'm like, wow, right? You're under no doubt as to why she was in that role, how she got to that role, right? And as to where she's going. So I think it's important for women to tell their stories because we need to showcase results. You know, there's a saying in my language, it's like a proverb in my language. I don't know how to say it in my language, so I'm not even going to try and say it in Yoruba. Right. But it's really this idea that when the lizard falls from the tree, starts to nod.
It acknowledges itself, even if
it acknowledges itself.
Even if
The only thing I know in the language will be alang, but everything else around that in the sentence, I'm not. But it's just this idea that we do have to blow our own trumpet, but we have to do it intentionally. There has to be substance. And I think you have to tell your story through the seasons. We don't need to explain and prove ourselves to people, but I think we live in such a superficial world. People infer, they draw conclusions, right? So if I'm transitioning from energy and I'm suddenly an entertainer singing with Davido,
you say that it didn't work there.
It didn't work. Like, what is the story? How are you connecting the dots? And that's something I've learned today. I always talk about connecting the dots between all of my experiences. So we need to tell our stories.
Right.
Also because we live in a noisy world. It's competitive, right? What will distinguish you from this person and this other person maybe just be your ability to articulate your story and then tie those with the goals and objectives of an organization that you want to work for. You know, what do I bring to the table? That's basically it.
That's a master class in seconds. Thank you for sharing that. Let's talk about your latest venture. A lot of people say, I want to be an entrepreneur now. But I can't do it. I can't. Can I? I can't. So there's this constant, I want to do it, but I can't, and I'm afraid. But here you are, you're like, I've done this, done. At least that's how it appears.
I like basically latest.
How have you, again, speaking of transitions, you've transitioned from corporate to being an entrepreneur full-time as you. Tell us about that journey.
Okay, I think I've always been an entrepreneur, to be honest, because all my corporate roles, you know, I keep telling you this, where I always gravitated towards corporate roles that had that strong, pioneering, innovative thing. So it's kind of always been there. And to be honest, this particular business, which is my advisory business, I actually registered it back in 2020 when I was in transition. I just had a baby. I'd left investment banking before I went into real estate. But I didn't have the heart. I think I just chickened out a bit. But so I had it registered. So it was always a seed that was sort of quietly germinating. But I also was clear about there's still certain experiences I wanted to gain before I finally ventured. I had a career plan. I had a plan. I had that 3-5 year thing. I was like, I need to get this type of experience. I need to go into this type of industry. I need to go into this type of role. It would help me tick certain boxes so that by the time I came fully into entrepreneurship, I felt confident about being able to come out and showcase myself as this entrepreneur running this advisory and consulting business. And running a service-driven business is sometimes a bit different from running a product-driven business because it's not always tangible.
It's not tangible.
So it's your intellectual property that you're essentially monetizing. But once I did it, people were like, it was about time. This is so long overdue. Finally, right? She's there because... so the transition was interesting. It was a lot easier. This was a timed transition. 2020 would have been right. It wasn't. Abrupt. I knew it wasn't the right time. So this was the right time. Also because I built quite a good table of clientele, people who knew my expertise, who were sure about my expertise, who were confident about what I could deliver. So, and I think sometimes at a certain stage in your life, not at all stages, as an entrepreneur, being able to hit the ground running can be very validating. Right. Now, it doesn't work out that way for everybody. And I realized actually this was the right time because when I started, I was even telling people that I've had to slow down a bit on business development so that I could build capacity for execution because the pipeline, it was just coming. Right. And so I realized actually, you know what? Yes, this is going to work out. So now putting structure in place, trying to sort of build my team and all of that. So the journey has really just been amazing because it's also just giving me that freedom completely to finally be Rolake in the 360 sense of the word. That. Not that some of my corporate roles couldn't give me that, but there's still corporate roles. There's still 9 to 5. There's still certain limitations within which you can operate. But now I am truly, truly just expressing who I am, what I want to do, how I want to do it. Right. Not without its challenges. That's another conversation, but
How powerful. Yeah. So tell us about the challenges, because again, I think people want to know, right? Like,
Yeah. Okay, so the first challenge is a platform challenge, right? Rolake is a household name in her field, right? But my business is in infancy. It's not a Dangote. It's not a business that will automatically open doors by itself. Right. So I, as an individual, I'm closely tied to my business brand name in this season, and I have to be because I built my credibility as Rolake, the energy sector, energy finance expert. So that's a challenge. Right. And so once I start building a team and I'm trying to put people in business development roles, I have to follow. I'm sort of doing a lot. So I think the platform challenge is where, and this goes back to just as a woman, not sort of building your entire identity around your corporate brand. Actually understanding who you are minus so-and-so PLC or so-and-so group. I think that's important because once you're yanked off that platform, you need to be secure and assuring yourself. So I think that's... and then the second thing is really just the operational nitty-gritty of building a business. I think it takes a lot out of you. The illusion that you'll be working less is not true.
It's more.
Yeah. And then the third one for me, which I found, especially being a woman in the energy sector, business development is a huge part of what you do, right? Now you're sort of going out of your own. People are asking all sorts of questions. How did she get this? How did she open this door? If you're not familiar with my background, my trajectory, you just assume some things dropped on my lap because I'm a woman, right? So there's this constant kind of thread, line I'm navigating around being too forward. And I hear all this noise about, the men, they'll just go for it. They'll just get on a flight to Abuja. They're there in the office. So, I don't have the full backing of a corporate organization with all that credibility. There's that, what's this woman? What's she looking for with all these male dominant, so that's a bit more of the softer issues. But again, I think sometimes I just have to refocus and say, this is where I'm going. This is what I'm trying to achieve. I'm competent, I'm able, and I got to this point because I did this and this, and the evidence is there for everybody to see. So I've had to block out that noise and just sort of push through those moments. So those are some of the...
Thank you for sharing. That's powerful. As a woman in a male-dominated field, what we sometimes see is women then, just to cope, not cope is probably not the word, but just to get on with it, then behave like the men. Because they're like, it's just like the fastest thing. I remember watching an interview once of a famous, female politician, and she was like, if the men are there at 3 a.m., I'll be there with them. You must behave like them. And I thought, and of course she's from like a different generation. Like I have no, there are no judgments to that technique. But I just wonder about the sustainability of a woman behaving like a man when she's, after all, not a man.
It's not sustainable.
Exactly. So how would you say you've been able to navigate that challenge of being successful in a field that is dominated by men while still maintaining, obviously, you're a woman?
Yeah, I'm in my soft era.
Your soft era.
Oh, this is a hard one because you can't change who you are. And I remember years ago in university, I read this book called Erotic Capital. It's not what you think. It's even some of the studio people are laughing. It just talks about the fact that you have to recognize your unique value proposition as a woman in the corporate world.
Right.
You are different to men in the corporate world in terms of your intrinsic God-given features and attributes. That cannot change, and you need to be clear about that. Right. And there's two sides of the coin to being both male and female. Women, we are known for our nurturing, for our emotional intelligence. We're known to be good at certain things, the whole proverbial multitasking. I don't know if that's true. So those things I fully lean into. I'm not trying to be like my male colleague or male business owner because I can't be. I had a really interesting conversation with a friend in Abuja recently on the sidelines of a oil and gas conference we were having. And I was sort of lamenting to him that certain things the men do, I can't do it because people start asking questions. So I showed him a group of men standing just there, networking over beer, they were drinking. And I said to him, so and so X, if I stand up and I just go and plant myself in their middle and start, what would you think? Right? He said, he won't think anything. I was like, that's you because you're educated and exposed. Right. But you see, women, we have different calculations, right? Because of the environment we live in. Yeah. If I just go there and plant myself, I'm having a business conversation. People might think, is she trying to? So there's certain calculations I have to make, but there's always a way, right? It doesn't mean I have to be up at 3 a.m. with them in a bar. But the things I can do, the places I can be, how am I mining those opportunities, right? And I always say that if something is at stake for you and your business, if that contract really matters to you, if that transaction, you will find a way to get to somebody who can help you open that door without compromising your values, your integrity, or who you are. Absolutely. And I think there are other ways we can lean into being feminine, even in the corporate and business place, that actually opens doors that are doors of integrity, right? Which have not involved us compromising on, right? That's the truth. It's as easy as you just looking good and showing up well, and people are like, who is that lady?
Right.
Wow. Right? And they give you an ear.
Right.
And you state your case and you get up and pack your bags and you go. Right? So I think it's not easy. Yeah. And I never want to discourage young women coming up about, you can't do this, you can't do that. Because another woman was telling me, Rolake, these men, if they call them and say, you have to be in Abuja the next day at 7 a.m., they will find a flight, get on it. So maybe you needing to invest relational equity in your home. To make sure that when you're around, So that the day you need to tell your spouse that, honestly, I need to go to Abuja tomorrow overnight. And then final thing I would say is your tribe. Your tribe is very important. One of my mentors, she's really amazing. You know her. Let me just call her Mrs. A. She told us about a time when one of the women in her circles, in one of the previous administrations, got a ministerial role, and she had to be going to Abuja. And she said about how she would tell the lady, every time you're going to Abuja, tell us your tribe. We'll keep you accountable. As soon as you finish what you are doing, straight to the airport, get on the plane, and back to Nigeria. So having a tribe and support system, I think, is also a really powerful tool you can use. Yeah.
That's powerful. And speaking about people who've impacted your life deeply, mentors, relatives, bosses, who are, some people who you feel like, this person has had this monumental impact on my life.
Okay. Do I mention names?
Yes.
Oh, okay.
Feel free.
The funny thing is I did this assessment very early on, and there were 5 people.
Oh, wow.
4 of them were men. Yes. So I have to say that. It wasn't, and it's not me trying to sort of paint a narrative that women don't support women, but it's just something that has happened in my career that I know, hang on. So the first person I would say is Pastor Emmanuel Mbakwe, who was my pastor in my UK church many years ago, who, when I was applying for one of my very first graduate roles, actually sat with me and took me through the whole consulting framework. Wow. And I always say that was key in landing that first job. Right. And he always took an interest in my career throughout the course of the years that ensued. I also became mentors to his daughters. They were very musical. I'm musical. I play the piano, so I would accompany them on their recitals. So Pastor Emmanuel Mbakwe, we call him Uncle E now, was very instrumental. Right. The second person that was instrumental is somebody called Paul Harry Eitna. Right. He's currently the managing director of EcoBank Côte d'Ivoire, and he was my boss when I was heading oil and gas research at EcoBank. So he was one of the first people that felt I could make a transition from having a non-banking background and transition into the banking sector. Fantastic boss, really empowering, gave me that opportunity, believed in me to sort of get into that banking transition. And then the third person I would say is Mrs. Wright, Mrs. Abimbola Wright. Now this story, you need a whole podcast to hear this story. She showed me Pepe in the early days, but she has now become like a mentor. We had a really difficult relationship in the beginning, and we've turned it around 360. Now she's like my go-to for almost everything. And she was one of the first people to recommend me for WIMBIZ speaking role, my very first WIMBIZ appearance in 2016. And since then, I became a part of the WIMBIZ ecosystem. Now, today, I'm on the board of trustees of WIMBIZ. So she's been instrumental in my career. And I think 2 more people I would name is Solomon Adegbe-Kino. He's a vice president for the Africa Development Bank. Infrastructure, been a huge supporter of my career. The real estate and infrastructure role that I got when I was making a transition, he recommended me, put me forward for me to enter the interview process. So doors, relationships. And then, of course, I will talk about Mrs. Awashika.
Of course, I was waiting.
Mrs. Awashika, I mentioned her before Mrs. A. I mean, what more can I say? She was initially a mentor from afar, and then I joined her 360 Executive Masterclass. And I was part of the first cohort of women that were mentored, executive women. So she's just been instrumental in that journey in so many ways. And we actually share some similarities in terms of that being multifaceted. And I've sought her views in some difficult times in that journey, and she's been very just present. So I could go on and on and on.
Thank you for sharing. Thank you. And I love the fact that men, because sometimes people feel like, it has to be a woman who is, and if that happens for you, that's great. But like, don't knock opportunities, because sometimes women are like, oh no, he can't. No, I don't. He can't be my mentor. I can't. But I'm like, What if God?
Why not? Yeah.
Why not? And what I also like that you've shared is the power of relationship building.
Absolutely.
Because it's not just what can you do. It's people think about networking. It's like, okay, I'm going to go to this event and meet these people, and then what? But it sounds to me like you've spent time and effort as well in building and nurturing these relationships. And I think that is so powerful.
Absolutely.
What do you do for fun?
Oh gosh, sleep. I love sleeping because I don't get enough of it.
Right.
Well, I play my piano.
Okay.
So I'm a pianist. I've been playing piano since I was 6. So I love that. I love spending time with my family. So I do that for fun. I also love going to artsy things, like shows, musicals, plays, art exhibitions. So I can spend a lot of money. I just have this obsession with those things.
Right.
Yeah, so those are some of the things
Okay.
I do for fun. Yeah. I'm also heavily involved in my church group.
Okay.
I head the Marketplace Alliance, which is the business network
Right.
of the church. I don't know if that's fun.
I mean, it's fun to
It's
you.
fun, it's work,
It's
but
fun.
yeah, it's outside of
Your
my
regular.
work. But I really love spending time with my family and
Right.
friends, close family and friends,
Right.
whether my parents or my own immediate
Right.
family. Of course, watching movies, neither here nor there, because I sleep, I just fall asleep. But yeah, artsy. I'm very artsy,
Okay.
creative, music
Okay.
and all of those things.
that.
Yeah.
And as we wrap up, how would you like to be remembered?
Okay. Wow.
As a mother, as a friend, as a sister, as a woman, as a leader, what do you want your legacy to be, and how would you want to be remembered?
Francesca, that sounds like the sort of question you ask somebody when they're 80. Okay, so I think I want to be remembered as somebody who helped other people find their purpose. So that for me is, I can say, yes, I want to be remembered as the woman with the biggest consulting, but I think that will happen. But I think it's really about, I was the person who really helped other people find their true purpose in life, whatever that may be. But for the people who are just nearest and dearest to me, I just want to be remembered as somebody who truly, truly loved. Because that's when all is said and done, all this one that we're talking, is the people who feel you every day, right? In the little things, in the minutiae, that I think those are the ones that really matter. So yes, that's it for me.
Thank you, Rolake. And on that powerful note, thank you for joining us today.
Thank you.
And for sharing so beautifully and powerfully and authentically. Women Leaders Unscripted today has been incredible. We've learned about being prepared, being competent, being curious, taking advantage of, opportunities, and transitioning and connecting the dots. It's been an incredible conversation today with the absolutely incredible Rolake Akinkugbe-Filani.